Hey there, it's the Fully Live Athlete Pastor channel. Let's talk about glory today. What is magnificent and awesome? You hear the word awesome a lot. We're talking about awesome, glory, wonder at things that we observe in our world. All right, so let's get to it. We're on the Online Bible Reading Club series. This is day 119 in the series. We're going to be previewing or reviewing the verses that you're called to read in the plan. The plan to read the Old Testament, New Testament will be placed below in the description. The link there will be there for you to click on. And we're looking at 1 Kings chapter 6 and 7. And we're also looking at the Gospel according to Luke chapter 20, verses 27 through 47. We're going to start with Luke real quick. So we're going to knock through these three sections really quick. They move quickly. But the first is you see, first thing you got to notice is that as you've been following Luke, you see Luke is building tension. He's showing the contrast and the conflict that's been boiling between the religious leaders in Jerusalem and Christ. And now Christ has arrived in Jerusalem to die. He's told his disciples over and over he's got to go to Jerusalem to die. And on the third day rise again. They didn't exactly understand what he was saying, but it would become obvious after the fact, of course, when he showed up alive on the third day, resurrected. Well, so he is going to die, and it's because, namely, he is a threat to the authority and the sovereignty of these leaders. Now, one of whom is the Sadducees, and they're the know-it-alls. They're kind of the religious liberals of the day, and they do not believe in the doctrine of the resurrection of the dead following death. They don't believe in it. Now, they get that because they only cite the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They don't mess with the prophets or the Psalms. And so what Jesus does here is they've put a parable to him to sort of win the argument against him. And I won't go into all the depths of that, but it's a pretty ingenious move by them to prove that there can't be a resurrection. And so his response essentially is, number one, you don't understand marriage, right? And because in the resurrection there won't be marriage. Marriage is to point to the resurrection kingdom and the reality of Christ and his people dwelling together. And so marriage is not going to be the thing there between a man and a woman, or a widow and or brothers and sisters, and all the levirate marriage rules that are outlined here from Deuteronomy. Now, what's going on here is Jesus uses their text, namely Exodus 3, to destroy their belief system, to absolutely demolish it at its foundation. And he uses the speech where God in the burning bush speaks to Moses, and he calls himself Yahweh. God does, the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob. And he says that present tense, implying that they are living, that post-death they live in the presence of God, that he is with them and they are with him. And this destroys the argument. Now, from there, Jesus moves on to absolutely decimate all the people that are complaining about how Jesus can be called the Messiah or the Son of David. How are you the Son of David when David in Psalm 110 says himself that the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. So if David calls him Lord or God, how can David or Christ be David's son? You see the tension there. How can the Lord be the son of David if David calls him Lord? It doesn't make any sense, right? It's kind of this being born again thing. Logically doesn't make sense to them. So how does he respond to that? Well, he looks at what you can see that the authorities of the day value. The scribes, those law experts today, they want all of the places of honor. They want all the places of prestige, the best seats at the banquets, the best seats in the sanctuary, the temple. They want all of the best. They want to be seen as important, so they want the really elaborate robes. They want everyone to greet them. They want to be the head of the table. Well, what he's saying here is that Jesus, though in his divine nature, he never leaves the right hand, okay, of God. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for you. So he's the Father saying to the Son, I'm going to make your enemies your footstool. So there's a sense in which God is divine, Jesus is divine, he doesn't leave. But look at who they see. They see Jesus riding into Jerusalem on the colt or on the donkey, right? You see him on the steed. And then he comes in poor, not externally impressive, not desiring the place of honor. In Philippians 2, it says that he doesn't, though he's equal to God, the very image of God, right? He doesn't want to keep it. He lays it aside for the sake of his people, and humility takes on the form of a servant in order to save us. Jesus is more glorious. He adds on humanity, sinless humanity, to himself, and becomes even more glorious in doing so because he maintains his eternal glory as the divine Son of God, but he takes on the humanity and the weakness and even to death and resurrection through death to overcome death and overcome sin and win forgiveness and justification for his people. So it's impossible that he could be even more glorious than he is, but in taking on the two natures, he doesn't cease to be both God and man into one person. So you see Jesus demonstrates how incredibly different he is and how his priorities are righteousness, not being seen as important, because he lays aside his glory. He goes from heaven above to the place of ultimate glory to the place of poverty and weakness and suffering and betrayal and sin. All right, so think about that. Think about how glorious Christ is in that. Without losing his divinity, he takes on humanity and he wins our salvation, because this is the covenant of grace. This is the promise. This is the plan of salvation. Now, going back to our Old Testament reading real quick, we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but what we're looking at here is the building of two houses. Now, the first one, if you look at chapter 6, is Solomon's building, King Solomon, the son of David, his building of the house of God. And then if you look at the first half of chapter 7, you see the narrative of his building his own house, his own palace, which is to be next door to the house of God. So two houses. Which one is more impressive? Now, the temple is very impressive. It's 90 feet long. A cubit was a foot and a half. And so as you lay it out in the text, 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high. Now, we're talking the middle of the Middle East, 1,000 years before Christ. And here you have this structure of uncommon size that Solomon has built, right? Within that, the most holy place is a cube. It's 30 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet, right? And you've got these gigantic structures in there, these cherubim, these angel structures, and they take up the whole width of this 30-foot cube, the innermost holy place, where they're 15 feet tall, and they're overlaid in gold, and they're 15 feet wide. Their wings stretch out 15 feet, and there's two of them. They're identical, and they touch, and so they spread across the room, and they're golden. Now, think about it, and there's elaborate carvings all over the walls. And this thing, it took 7 years to complete the whole thing, and 4 years for the foundation to be laid. It's so enormous and elaborate, and it's uncommon. It really does adequately demonstrate the uncommonness of God, that he dwells in a copy of his reality like this. This is a copy. It's not the thing, but it's a copy. And what he says to Solomon in 11 through 13 of this chapter 6 is amazing. It says, if you will walk in my ways, I will establish my word, and I will dwell among the house, or among the people of Israel, the children of Israel, and I will not forsake my people Israel. That's the promise. The great promise since the beginning is restored union and communion with God, that he would create a people and dwell with them. That's what he says. Now, It's a glorious picture of communion, a house where God will dwell with his people, and it will be elaborate and uncommon. It's incredible. Then, the next chapter, chapter 7, we've got the story of the second house. It says at the end of chapter 6, he spent 7 years building the house of God. How long do you think it took him to build his own house? 13 years. It's huge. It's not just 90 feet long, it's 150 feet long. It's not just 60 feet wide, it's 75 feet wide. It's 45 feet high. So you've got God's house is 30 feet high, and Solomon's house next door is 50% bigger in height. That's incredible. It took twice as long almost to build. He's got a throne in there. Now, it looks like God's house. It mimics it to some degree, but it's fascinating how costly it is, how wondrous it is, and it's appropriate for a king to dwell, especially God's king to dwell in a fancy house, right? To show the dignity of the job and the glory of it, right? But it's kind of like his priorities are out of whack, that he wants to be thought of somebody. He even creates a model house for his wife, his first wife, the daughter of Pharaoh, like his own, within his own palace. And it's incredible. So as you look at that, you think about, where are our priorities? What are we awed at? Are we awed at what people will think about us? Are we awed at what we have, these created things that we possess that demonstrate glory? Because there's a lot of glory out there, but the most glorious thing, the most wondrous thing, is Christ and his glory, the one who did not count it robbery or grasping to hold on to God, his godness, but took on, without ceasing to be God, true humanity, the form of a servant, in order to save us from our sins. He is the ultimate glorious one. He dwells in the majesty, not the holy place, not built with hands, is impressive and elaborate and is time consuming, and as much blood, sweat, and tears went into putting that temple together, outlined in chapter 6 of 1 Kings. This one's not even built with hands. It is the true glorious house, and Christ leaves it and comes to be born of a virgin, to trade his house for a manger and a cross. That is the glorious God that we serve. He's a God worth worshiping because he promises to protect, to guard, and to forgive his people. He promises to dwell with his people, because ultimately King Solomon failed, but the real king, Jesus, would not fail. He didn't fail you. Even when you were faithless, he was faithful. So that is why we can dwell with God forevermore, and there's nothing more glorious. You think about weightiness and glory, nothing more glorious than Christ. The other religions out there talk about what you need to do in order to make yourself right with God, but God will have none of it, because he's uncommon. He's holy. He doesn't fit in our categories. We cannot ascend to him. He comes down to us to lift us up. We can't do it. Religion, man-made religion, it does not work. Only in Christ can we be saved. With that said, I'll leave you with that. God bless you. This has been a long one. I apologize for that, but I hope it's been helpful to you. We'll see you next time on the Online Bible Reading Club. Peace.